Uh, let's call our meeting to order. And I thought what we could begin to do was just give an update on the distribution of materials in our meeting with the city, and then get into where do we go from here with plans. So we had a meeting with City of Troy on Wednesday with the controller, Andrew Piotrowski, and the Director of Human Resources, Gabrielle Mahoney. And it was a very helpful meeting, about 45 minutes long. The thing that I really enjoyed about both is that they were fully welcoming to us and greeted us as partners. And the chief issue for the city and for us has been what is likely to be the reduction from the planned this year's tax receipts after July. And Andrew Petowski, the controller, is very actively monitoring, comparing receipts presently with receipts from last year. And so far, there has not been a significant drop off. It was in like 3%. And what he is doing is monitoring the metric very, very closely. And they too are waiting with a bated breath and some concern about what will the impact of the economic situation be on taxpayers, and what is a likely result in possibly decreased taxes for Troy. He's going to give us active reports after July 1. He's monitoring it day by day. And he was thinking that in the first week of July, he'll have a good idea. The general goal that we picked as a target to think about reductions was a 10% drop in that. That's what they are also using. And they'll be verifying it with closely watched monitoring on a day-by-day basis, and they'll be freely exchanging the information with us. And on the second, the human resources person, Gabrielle Mahoney, shared with us two documents that are about 30 pages long each about civil service requirements should we be taking any personnel actions. And again, we were greeted very well. They will be the civil service entity to assist us in any actions taken. And I wonder if, Maria, would you like to comment further on the meeting with the city? Anything I might have not presented?
How to unmute here. One big difference between the city and us is that the city is able to borrow and is planning to borrow in anticipation of not having the income that they would like to have. Another thing was that they mentioned a program that they had explored. Let me see whether I can find the name of that. It's a job share program with the Department of Labor paying 50% of the salaries of people who would continue to work 50%, but then receive this payment from DOL for the other half of their salary, at which they would not work. They would only be working half-time. Paul, I don't know whether you've had a chance to explore that at all.
Let me just say to the listeners, because there are many people listening, the objective of that program is to have people work a reduced rate, but receive the same amount of money they would have received in compensation. So the actual financial impact on being reduced would be zero, but it would be half paid through unemployment. You go ahead, Paul, and any other thing you might have want to contribute about the meeting.
No, I would have to get a lot more detail on that. I assume the Labor Department is not particularly easy to contact at the moment. But it does have some merit in terms of what we could use. So I'll be checking into that. It's kind of, it bothers me that the way it was set up, you know, it was set up as you know, employees of a particular unit, and that may not quite work in our case, but it's definitely worth exploring.
What Paul is referring to is that all employees in that particular unit, which is more like a division of the library, would be treated in the same way. So everybody would be 50% time.
Yeah, I don't quite know yet how that works for us.
So we used that program in my business, and we also used it at the Hart Cluett Museum earlier this year. It worked better at the Hart Cluett Museum because what we were able to do is we were able to cut expenses early on before the PPP loan program came out, and there's another loan program that we were able to apply for. But it allowed us to be able to reduce staff expenses without having any impact on the staff personally on their finances. It was very, very successful. You know, we have a smaller staff than the library. At Smith & Jones, when we did it at Smith & Jones, if I remember correctly, I did not administer the program, but I think you're able to class people together based on their relative job roles. So you don't, while it's not division, it's not like, what you're trying to do is you're trying to place people together that are going to each work 50% and one person is covering the other 50%. That's the inclination of the program, and so that everybody within that classification is the same. We actually had to create classifications at Smith & Jones in order to be able to use the program. So I think there's some flexibility in it there. In both cases, it was really easy to work with the Labor Department. They were very, very, yeah, and their motivation is they don't want you to get rid of people if you can keep them. They don't want people to be, you know, they don't want to put people on unemployment who could, you know, hold on to a job that is likely to actually come back. And so they'd rather do that than have somebody be furloughed or ultimately laid off because, you know, an organization doesn't have immediate short-term, you know, either revenue or cash flow to be able to pay their salaries.
And one of the positives I saw was that it was coming from the city, who had explored it for their own use. And therefore, we'd probably be likely to qualify for it when we haven't qualified for other programs that were available.
On our way out from the meeting, or the discussing the human resources, we were given two booklets. The first one is 39 pages long. I can't see my own. But we were also sent it electronically, and the title of the handout was Guidelines for Administration of Reductions in Force of Local Government. And it's very detailed about preparations that need to be made and categorizing staff by seniority, by group, etc. And with the help of the appointing authority and the civil service group that may have lists. The second handout was Troy Civil Service Commission. And I think because there's so many staff on this, you would be interested in receiving that. Be very happy to provide it for you. But the questions, I was reading it, and I had some questions myself about our civil service status. who is the appointing authority for us in civil service status? Are we the library, the appointing authority, or is it done through the civil service connection that we have with the city of Troy? Do you know, Paul?
I guess we would be the appointing authority, and since we're doing the hiring, the civil service is providing the testing and screening of candidates.
So the steps to identifying a retention status and a retention standing for employees are done by job categories, by group. And we will need the civil service advisor in terms of group names. Is that correct, Paul? Or are you looking at all staff?
Well, it's just a matter of, if it's done by seniority, it's just a matter of making sure that our seniority list agrees with the city's seniority list. But we do have a complete seniority list.
Did you review the document that they gave us? Because it seemed to me that seniority was critically important after the grouping by job title, so that the grouping would be seniority within that title,
Right.
and that they wanted us to categorize retention status in those areas that were being affected. So the first thing we would need to do if we were making decisions would be to categorize the job titles so that we could establish their retention rates. And within that group, the seniority would apply. It's not strictly seniority. Seniority is applying if you're reducing a particular job.
Are you asking if we have those records?
No, I was just saying my understanding of how you would approach that would be the first civil service requirement is to group the job categories. And within those job categories, there's seniority and bidding, et cetera. So a person can bump down. And for us to apply that to staff, we would have to have the civil service groupings of the staff and our proposed reductions before we could calculate retention standing. And it is not, we have made no decision to reduce staff. What we need to look at is come up with a plan that matches the financial needs, and then see, then begin to apply what we might elect to do. Now, have you taken reduction plans any further, Paul?
Well, I've analyzed all the information that we have. I don't know. We have all that information, all the classifications and all the seniority, and those have been analyzed.
So do you have a specific plan to reduce? And if so, what are you thinking?
Well, the one I already presented in my director's report.
In the director's report that you gave at the board meeting, it was an aggregate report. It didn't specify individual job titles. We need to,
Wait a second. It did, in fact. there were no staff recommendation reductions in the 10% plan. There were staff reductions in the 15 and the 20% plan. In the 15% plan, now these still included relying on the undesignated construction funds as a reserve. But then with the 15% plan, let me take a look here. Yeah, in the 15% plan, for example, the last sentence, I estimate that we would need to furlough 1 page, 1 library assistant, and 1 library associate. In the 20% plan, let's see. In the 20% plan, it said that you would have to add 1 librarian 1 and 1 more library assistant position. Those are specific job classifications.
And then the 10%, well, let's have a
I don't
discussion now.
I don't think that was in the director's report.
Yeah, it is.
No,
It
it's
is.
definitely there. It's definitely there.
Absolutely there. But the one thing that isn't clarified, Paul, is those are job titles, but you didn't clarify further. Are we
there it is.
talking full-time positions, part-time positions, full-time equivalency across those job titles?
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, in the 15% plan, those were part-time positions.
All part-time?
Yeah, the 1 page, 1 library assistant, and 1 library associate.
So, okay.
I have a question about the meeting with the city. Did you discuss with them their intentions as regards to the governor's and the legislature's plan to defer collection of property taxes? Because from what I understand, the legislature, the bill the legislature passed that I think the governor either is signing or has signed, was voluntary based on the municipality. It was, you could defer. And do we know if what the city of Troy is planning on doing in relationship to that? Because that has a huge impact on our cash flow.
One thing I remember, Mark, from that, and I don't think the city hasn't really made any decision here, but they have a kind of a difficulty in that they collect not only our tax levy, but as well as the school district and the bid. Well, what exactly would that mean? Can they make decisions about that? And they're really not sure whether they can actually, postpone the library tax or the school district tax or the county.
Oh,
When we talked with Andy, he said that the governor had not signed that bill.
Mhm.
And I believe he also said that he didn't know what the decision from the city would be. That, it would have an impact on the city as well as it would on us. And as Paul described, when it's kind of unclear in that bill whether the decision is the city's decision to make for everybody, or whether the different pieces, the bid and the library and the county, each made the decision about delaying. And so I don't think he had a real answer to that. He he seemed to feel that it would be difficult to try and deal with them all separately and having different decisions for all of them.
So we don't know at this point what that impact is going to be. Because you did mention that the difference between the library and the city is that if the city defers the taxes, they can borrow the money to carry the cash flow, and we can't.
And I think they're talking about borrowing the money even without the deferral.
Yeah.
And I believe that they asked the different areas of the city to reduce the budget by 10%.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a meeting the night before we met with Andy, with the city council.
Right.
I don't know whether other people saw that or not.
I saw that there was a meeting. I did not see the minutes from it.
Another thing that was said, when I asked Andy how soon they would know how the tax receipts were going from the 31st of July, he said in about a week after the deadline, they should have a figure on or some data on the rate of payment. He also said that the escrow payments are usually done by the bank about the 28th through the 31st.
So given what we know, is it reasonable for us to start planning for a 10% reduction and also figuring out a plan for what we would do in order to be able to deal with cash flow, having savings or having kind of a cushion somewhere, because we're not going to be able to borrow, and at the same time also look into the Labor Department's work job share program to see if there's a way that we can accomplish all of that without having any negative financial impact on any of our staff?
My preference is to plan and also to try and do the savings without staff being affected, at least until we have more information.
I agree.
So it's 2 months until we get much better data regarding the rate of tax payment. I know Paul doesn't want to see the materials budget touched, but to me, the advantage of materials is that, hey, if we don't spend the money and it turns out we don't need to save, that our tax receipts are full and expected, then we can then spend the money on materials. If we furlough a staff person and then 2 months later decide that, oh, we didn't need to do that, it's a much more difficult situation to come back from, and also has a greater impact on the people involved. So if we can do the 10% based solely on things that if we don't need the money, then can be spent and are much easier to recuperate from, that would be my choice. I'm uneasy about Paul's recommendation to spend what is the closest that we have to reserve fund. Because then if we have a cash flow problem, there won't be anything to protect us from that. We won't have anything to just, hold us another week, maybe, if that's all we need. So that makes me really uncomfortable. That makes me feel as though I were wiping out my personal savings and had no buffer. On top of that, all that we have in the designated construction fund is money for the library construction grant for the north wall. The SAM grant, we have to expend the money and get reimbursed. And we have nowhere for that to come from other than the undesignated construction. So that's an impact that wasn't mentioned previously. But, and because we can't borrow like the city does to fund that and then be reimbursed. So I would like to see us put a freeze on the materials budget until we get the figures from the April or the July 31st tax deadline, and also follow the other recommendations that Paul made about the reductions in the repair budget and also the security budget.
If I could add a little bit too, I would consider the the transfer of money from the undesignated construction grant is pretty much a loan. A loan from ourselves to ourselves. Again, with the idea that I don't think the reduction of income is going to last forever. And I think that's something where, we can replenish that when we do have the funds. So I guess I'm not as worried about that. The fact that we do, that the east wall is a DASNY grant based on, it's refunded when we submit the bill. They assured me that that's a very short period of time, a week or two, which I think we can handle basically through operating funds. And again, that depends on the timing of when we do that particular project.
Paul,
Incidentally, there is pretty much a freeze on materials right now.
remind me the back wall, the time frame that we have to do this in. How far can we push it out?
Which one is the back wall? North or the
North
east?
wall, or I'm sorry, the east wall. Sorry about that. There's doesn't seem to be a deadline on that project.
Okay.
The reason we were concerned, Evelyn, was that we were trying to put the two projects together.
Right.
Together and separate. I mean, we still wanted them, build separately, but be able to do them through the same bidding process and the same contractor.
Does the financial constraints change your mind on that any?
Yeah, kind of. I'm still thinking about it. We, right now, we're very close to bidding because we had been waiting for the hazmat report, which is not a good one particularly, but it's going to cost extra. I can still stall the whole project as well. But we only have 1 year from now to complete the Northwood project.
Right. The courtyard.
Yeah. So we kind of have to move, contractors can drag their feet and stall, and we don't
Right.
really
Well,
want
I
to.
understand. Plus, that wall is much more in jeopardy than anything.
Right.
But I will say this as I consider myself an uber patron of the library. I would so much rather see our reduction or even a total freeze of materials. And I can't believe of all people I'm saying this over any kind of furloughing or layoffs or reductions in staffing. Because again, I have evolved as a member of this group. They're our foundation even more than the materials. We can always find materials. We can always, as Bree says, make up for lost time at some point when there was a better flow in our finances. But right now, we've got to keep the real structure of the library, our mission structure, more than anything else.
Also,
Paul, Paul, a question. When do you plan on checking in with the Department of Labor about this payment program, pay program?
I will start that process tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow, okay.
Yeah, I want to check with the city too and see if they can direct me, the best place to get that information and get it quickly. But if I could step in and answer a couple of questions here at the moment. I had started a plan, given the concern that I've heard from the board. I had started a plan to return to using actual timesheets for part-time staff beginning the first pay period in July. As you know, we have been paying all staff based on their schedules before we close down. Returning to actual timesheets would be based on, again, strictly for part-time staff and primarily for people, really all for people who can't work from home. The result of doing that, because we have two teams now, even with limited hours, what the result of that would be pretty much to cut that pay in half for part-time people. Two results in that. The big result is probably the impact that it has on staff morale. The second thing is that the savings for the month of July would be about only 8% of our payroll budget.
8%
I don't
of what budget?
this impact for a
payroll?
long period of time, because our plan is to, hopefully in August, to return to regular hours. So it really wouldn't last very long.
We would return to what after August, Paul?
Regular hours.
But with the same amount of staff? I mean, would their hours change if we're going to less capacity for staff?
Well, we're at limited hours now. So
So,
there'd be no difference in the current hours.
so in August, the idea is to go to full hours, full service, 9 to 8, 1 to 5, and Saturday summer hours. Oh, are you going into
Saturday summer hours, yeah.
So there'll be no weekends?
Saturday would be summer hours on our full schedule.
Okay.
I mean, that's hoped for. I mean, again, we can't totally predict this, but that's what we're hoping to do. And again, we're including Lansingburg as well, so with both locations.
I need to go through some of this. Paul, you had reduced the security budget a bit too. I know some of it is because, well, we haven't been open, and I'm taking it security wasn't there. Are you looking at security coming back at the same hours they had been previously?
I'm looking at security coming back when we allow the public in the building, which is, again, something we're looking for next week. At reduced hours. I mean, we're not the full hours that they were there before. So that would start up security again, but we haven't paid security since March.
our financial statements through May, we weren't seeing the total savings. So that category of the line, I pulled up your report, but I didn't have the financial statement here. I was just having trouble with the totals, Paul. And so we're trying to reach 117,800 in savings to hit a 10%.
We're only looking at half a year. Right? There's only half of
Right.
a budget year left. So,
So it's half of 117, it's not
well,
117.
it's half of our revenues. So our revenues are 1.3 million.
Okay, in Paul's report, it says 10% of the total tax levy is 117,840. And we're trying to reach half of that as the goal, not the whole.
No, it wasn't just the tax levy, it's our entire revenue.
Okay,
Because we have other revenue we're not going to see because we don't have services that we're providing for a period of time. Our revenue will be
Revenue
reduced
is
for the
always
year.
pass through. We don't do what we don't receive.
Right.
The only actual impact that I can see is going to be, one of the impacts is going to be state aid, LLSA, which is 15,000. State pulls back, they could pull the whole thing.
Right. Well, the 10, 15, and 20 wasn't trying to figure out exactly how much we are expecting not to get. It was as a rough estimate, and under each of those amounts, how we would respond, how we would make up for the deficit. So that's why using 10% of the revenue, the total revenue, for the remainder of the budget from July 1st through December is the best way to go, which is probably about 675,000, and 10% of that would be about 67,000. So if we put a freeze on materials and take the other 3 suggestions for savings that Paul suggested, that's about that 10%. Now, 15 and 20, that, we would have to look at that, but that would equal about that 10% without touching the undesignated construction and without furloughing any staff at this time.
I like the idea of considering using the money from that fund as a loan to ourselves.
I'm sorry?
I love the concept of thinking that using that money is like giving ourselves a loan.
Oh, right.
And I would agree with that if it were to be dealing with a cash flow issue, a temporary cash flow, but to use it for operating expenses and anticipate getting it from the future is quite uncertain in my mind, especially because, a lot of this money came from bequests of people dying, and we haven't had, that is uncertain. It's not predictable.
Right, but
I think I have already implemented the budgetary constraints that I reported on in my director's report. I'm pretty confident that going forward, we won't have much trouble with them. I think there's other savings in the budget too as we go along. Our structure is such that basically I approve all expenses. So all of those purchases essentially go through me eventually. And I can sometimes pick and choose what's important to go forward with and what's not. So I'm looking also for additional savings as we go along.
Although, the opportunities for additional savings are minimal.
Yeah.
I think like programs. It's a minimal amount that goes into that. Even if you stop all programs, there isn't much to be gained. And we can evaluate this as we go along too. And if we find that we've had tremendous savings on utilities, for instance, then that could be available to put elsewhere. But because of the seriousness, I think that's why it's important to take immediate action, and hope for the best, but plan for not to be best.
And Maria, when you say immediate action, are you talking about the first 3 points that Paul's made?
I'm not sure which the first 3 are.
The 10%, the maintenance, security.
Materials budget 32,000, repair line 6,500, security budget 3,000.
Which is about $10,000, right?
1, 2, 3. Yep, it is 3.
10.5. And then if we save about 60,000, or if we freeze the remainder of the materials budget, I think we saw bills that wouldn't show up until the June financial statement of about 5,000 already. We'll have about 60,000. So it's about 70,000. Rough, not precise. So that would be 10%.
Not forgetting the fact that we also expect almost 1% is built into the budget for delinquent taxes. 10,000. So that's built in as an expense.
So in this discussion, can you go back to reducing? There was a position you were going to do part-time, do it by timesheet rather than a straight allocation, and it would result in a 50% reduction to the part-time. How many people are involved? And I didn't really follow exactly what you were saying as a savings on that. What I'm trying to do is distinguish between non-impacting the personnel and impacting the personnel. So that
Well, this
all
would
the things that
impact
we
the personnel.
discussed today, the only thing impacting personnel was that one. But could you restate it again? I want to more clearly understand.
We have been paying all part-time people based on schedules that were made back in March. So if a person was scheduled for 20 hours per pay period, then that's what we continue to pay for, regardless of whether they're in the library working. Now, some people or many of our staff can work from home, but some cannot. Particularly part-time people, and particularly people who work in circulation part-time. So the plan as it stands was to, on the first payroll of July, to return to paying exactly according to the time card, which is how many hours you worked in the building. Our new schedule is, basically, staff is in the building 10 to 6, Tuesday through Saturday. And so you would fill out a time card based on the exact hours you worked in the library. If we followed that plan, it would save about $4,717 in a month on payroll. But again, it's a very temporary solution because we had planned to go back to regular hours possibly as early as August. So the payroll would pretty much go back up at that point. That has an impact on the staff, obviously. People would probably see about only 50% of what they're currently seeing in their paycheck. And again, it's at this point, it may not be worth it in terms of this impact on the staff.
Would it be less impacting, Paul, to pursue the shared program of the Department of Labor and identify 1 or 2 positions that could participate? The result of that, if we did it that way, it would not have a financial impact on the staff. We still might realize the savings that you've talked about, but without impacting the actual finances of staff, we could reach the same goal and realize the savings directly.
Yeah, it is possible that that would work. You know, as long as the timing would work. I mean, we hear nothing but stories that people can't, you know, get through to unemployment and the Department of Labor. So if that drags out, then, you know, that becomes a problem. So that's something I need to kind of check into too.
Are those stories from organizations or from individuals trying to get?
Individuals.
But that might be a different phone number.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
I mean,
Did-
the city seems to have had conversations regarding this program.
Get a contact from the city and a phone number from the city.
Well, that's why I said I was going to contact the city first and see.
Dial direct.
Yeah, right.
If you want, Bob, I can find out who the Hartcliffe Museum used, who they contacted.
No, that's
because-
good. That, yeah.
Because they didn't really have any problems at all.
Oh, good. Okay. Any contact would be helpful. Yes.
Of the 2 directions, I think it's the one less impacting on people. No one's going to have to step away with less dollars. It still gives you the option to do the savings that you've talked about, but it would be based on the reality, but it would give us a firmer idea of savings in July. If it could be put in place that quickly, and it may well be. I think if we can keep the staff whole and still realize the savings and not go into the construction fund,
Mhm.
I think it would be safer all around. We've talked about the construction fund without others who are on here today before. And the idea of not going into it is that they're committed for projects. They may be future projects, but that money is not free money. So it's not free to be expended. So by taking the action to try to see if we can activate a shared program, I think it would be a surer way of getting to the saving.
Yeah, I'm also concerned about I love the idea of loaning us the money, but everything I'm seeing from every source is that this economic situation that we're in is not going to go away in the near term. And the Fed is saying 9 to 10 years. That's not near term, and so it would be. We'd be in a rough situation if we lent the money to ourselves and we weren't able to pay it back to ourselves. And I tend to be fiscally conservative when making these kinds of, looking at these kinds of things, because, if we're fiscally conservative and we're wrong, we're in a much better financial shape. If we're fiscally liberal and we're wrong, we could end up closing the library, and I don't want to be in that position.
Nor do I.
So if we pursued this vigorously and got it into place, I think we'll be back in this meeting after the 4th of July to see what more would need to be done, but it would be a bridge to at least that period. The city says they'll give us firmer information after July 5th. And if that's, I think we'd have a more realistic basis on which to act, and we could have a firmer idea of to what degree we have to act. And I think it would be the fairest way in terms of not financially taxing our staff.
I don't know that they will have firmer information. I think they said that they're going to be monitoring it more frequently. One of the things Andrew said was, when I asked what they were seeing in the way of back taxes and the payment in back taxes, he said that they weren't able to really determine that because the foreclosure dates have been pushed back. So that there are lots of problems with lots of different kinds of problems and trying to get better information to make decisions. But, you know, what I keep being told, it's July 31st when you see that deadline. He did say that they've just sent out the overdue notices for having failed to pay taxes, so that there may have some more money coming in that way. So we'll be getting more current information, but I don't know how much firmer it will be in trying to make decisions before that July 31st deadline.
You know, with property taxes, there are those who have already set up automatic payments. So whether or not it's deferred or not, unless someone wants to change the kind of their bank records, some of those payments are going to be coming in automatically anyways. And I think there are those who have mortgages probably have to, I think their bank, does the bank sometimes take care of property taxes?
His
Yes.
metrics are very limited times. He's comparing week to week, year to year. And he said when he gets to July, when the automatic payments would happen, he's going to compare July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and compare it to the income of last year. And then he'll be better able to project, are we looking at a reduction in actual taxes in the door, and to what degree? And he'll project it by percentage, but it's a more educated way to get to an estimate. It's still a gross estimate, which would be more confirmed by the end of July, certainly. But I had the sense that he is sharp enough to see, because they're as interested, more interested than we are actually on their own. Their budget is much bigger, and their issues are much more complex. So the actual monitoring that he's doing is very, very detailed, and he will share it with us in a timely way. I said to him, well, at that time, you're going to be so committed on city issues. How are we sure we're going to hear from you on ours? We're sort of tail on the door. And he said convincingly he will keep us appraised. So I think we won't have as firm, you're right, Marie, it won't be a firm number, but it will be an estimate based on metrics that are measured by actual dollars in the door on a comparison basis. And he said he'll feel a lot more confident in his projections then, which is early July. So I think if we take this course of action now and continue to plan and have a meeting toward the end of the first week or the second week in July, we'll have a lot more information to see what we need to do. But
I'm not comfortable waiting.
shared program is important.
I think since we're talking about making adjustments starting July 1st, that we need to have some more finance committee meetings, like more information on the programs, you know, and in terms of the 50/50 program. I would feel much more comfortable scheduling another finance committee before July. I have,
Last week in June, that'd be fine.
yeah, because I just think we're in such a serious situation right now that we can't.
If we have special finance meetings every 2 weeks, and that would fit that schedule. 2 weeks
Well,
from now, the second week in July, and
well,
enact accordingly. But
I think we should do it on an as needed basis. Like, you know, it would be good to have more information on what the options are as far as the staffing. Maybe we should have separate meetings on the finance versus the personnel kinds of things. I have some more notes of what Andy said, was that he thought the tax receipts for 2020 were down somewhat versus 2019. And that the good news was that mortgage taxes were up somewhat.
So Paul, I just got information back. There is no person to contact at the Department of Labor. You go to the employer page on the New York State Department of Labor site, and there are forms that you can fill out in order to be able to apply. There's an organizational form, and then there's individual forms for staff members. And you don't need to take an entire class of people or an entire department of people. You need to have 2 people to share the work from a department. So for instance, if you've got 5 people in the department, you can select 2 people to each work 50% of the time and then get 50% of their payroll paid by the department. It's not, you don't have to spread it across the whole department. That would be crazy. But if you looked at the forms, according to what they just texted me, if you look at the forms, it makes it fairly easy to figure out what it is you're going to do. They said that every time they called the labor department, they got somebody different. So
Yeah, right.
there is no,
Yeah. Well, that'd be good. I'll take a look at that and see where we can, how we can fit it in.
Yep. So when are we meeting again?
How about next week?
well, let me pull up the calendar. Paul, do you think you would be ready by a week from Friday, or go to the next week, 29th or 30th?
Oh, that's pretty late for July 1st.
It's hard to say, but we might shoot for next week.
You want to shoot for, like, you know, earlier in the day on Monday?
Yeah, we have a meeting
You have a staff meeting,
Monday
right?
at 10.
We do Tuesday,
Mhm.
the 23rd.
I'm free.
You say a week, Evelyn, you were saying the 23rd, we were talking about the 26th. I'm sorry, got to give a message on my phone.
Marie was thinking that is too close, I believe, she said, to July 1st. So, and the 22nd in the morning, they have a staff meeting, and I may be occupied, but the 23rd, so that's earlier to make Marie happy. And
Yeah, 23rd works for me.
so you guys might have had some discussion that, you know, we might be privy to as a staff.
Okay, I'm sorry, Paul, I didn't hear what you said. Evelyn was speaking at the same time.
I said the 23rd in the morning works for me.
Good.
So we want to do like 10 a.m.?
That's fine.
All
Okay,
right. Is that
Now-
okay with you, Marie?
yes, that sounds good. Now, Paul he's going to explore the job share program. Is there anything else that other of us should help with? And I don't have anything particular in mind. It just seems like
I know that if I could, I know that there's concern. I think it was Mark who mentioned businesses, many businesses go out of, go bankrupt, not because they don't have the assets, but they can't pay the bills. So, which is cash flow. There's basically a cash issue.
That was actually Marie.
Okay.
The quote was, businesses, her instructor said, businesses don't go bankrupt because of carrying debt. They go bankrupt because they don't have the cash to pay a bill.
Okay. That being said, I have a cash flow report that I get all the time, constantly. Would you folks be interested in taking a look at that? In which case Joy can simply email that to you, and that'll give you some idea. We talked about a balance sheet, which we're kind of working on. Our system does produce one, but we have to figure out exactly what our system means by some of the figures that it's reporting. But this cash flow document will tell you exactly where we stand in terms of cash flow.
I think that would be helpful. I think Marie's concern, and my concern at least, is not cash flow in the immediate future, but cash flow as we get towards the end of the year. You know, as things get delayed and we start burning through cash, you know, if there's significant delays in tax receipts, we could run out of cash.
well,
Yeah.
and right, also into the beginning of next year.
Yeah. We have,
Because we wait until March for our big tax payment next year. So we you know, we have to have enough cash to get us beyond this budget year.
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
and
right now we're cash rich. You know, we're not a cash poor organization, but that cash is good. And based on our budget, that cash has been allocated for very specific things between now and March, and we want to make sure we can get through.
And the bigger the deficit that occurs, or I don't know whether that's the right word, but you know, whether it's 10, 20, 15, the higher that number is, the sooner we could have cash flow problems.
Yeah, I mean, $20,000 over 6 months, you know, is easier to cut than $20,000 in a month.
Got it. Amortizing the cuts.
Yeah.
Paul, remind us, please, or at least me, of when the next tax influx would be.
I believe, let's see, sometime third week of September. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Joy. I don't know if, I'm trying to remember my charts.
Yes, normally it's like the third week of September.
Yeah, okay. And that's the July 31st, second tax payment?
Okay.
Yes. So that means we have 90 days before we find out what really happened. I mean, they'll be able to give us an indication, but we won't see.
They'll tell us before that. I mean,
Yeah.
Andrew has promised to keep me in the loop in terms of what his figures are, and he'll know some things, you know, as soon as the taxes start to roll in.
Yeah.
He
Have we
doesn't
re-
call you, you can call him.
Have
You
we
have
received a tax payment for this month yet?
We have pretty much everything up to date at this point. I haven't received anything more this month yet.
Because that comes in kind of in the middle of the month, so
Yeah,
we usually get it a couple of weeks before
we
our meeting.
started deliveries and mail service again. So I haven't even checked Well, I don't know, Joy, you started the mail service, right, on Friday?
Yes, the mail service started Friday.
Unfortunately, I'm not allowed in the building this week,
Oh,
but Joy is, so she can check on that.
So you alternate? This is your week out of the building, Paul?
Yes, this is my week out of the building.
okay. You're not, haven't been found positive or been in contact then.
According to his health form, everything is fine.
Is it not being allowed in the building a personal health issue, Paul?
No, no, no. The staff is divided into two separate teams. So there's an A team and a B team. I happen to be on the A team, which has worked last week in the building. But if we don't do that, then we lose all of our staff, or a large percentage of our staff if somebody comes down with this virus.
And Joy
So-
is on B?
What's that?
Joy is on B team?
I'm on
Yeah,
B
Joy is on
team.
B.
Which team is going to win?
I don't know, BT.
Whoever
You're all
doesn't
the
get this virus wins.
I know we have a lot of people monitoring the meeting, a lot of the staff. And I would just like to say something to them. If you're interested in the materials that we got on the guidelines for administration of reduction in force or the civil service, we have them electronically and be happy to provide them for you, the public documents. Our immediate plans are not to impact staff. As you can hear, our discussions are, we need to get to proper savings, not to be bankrupt and be able to meet our needs, but we'll do everything we can to maintain full staffing and would only take actions in that arena when all else is explored and not promising. And you are important to us. If we need to take action, we'll try to do it in ways that don't impact you financially to the degree that we can. And we've given you a priority in this period, and we will continue to, because you are the library. Anyway, do any other trustees want to make a comment to the staff who are listening?
Well, I think all the concern that we're voicing about finances is because we're concerned about having the library continue to run and not having a shutdown, which would affect all the staff as well as the patrons. So that's why we're so concerned and want to be on top of the situation, even though I know it may be worrisome to the staff, but in some ways it should actually be reassuring that we're so concerned.
Anyone else want to comment before we end the meeting? Thank you for your interest. It's obvious that these are tough times just across the nation, and we're very mindful of you all, the library. So, anything else to be said before we adjourn? All right, then let's adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Mark in particular, very nice. Thank you.